Like watching the numbers go up.
It's always a good feeling.
Yes. Hey, everybody, we're going to get started in just a few minutes. Welcome. So give it a couple more minutes.
I think we can get started.
You want to get started?
Yeah.
All right, let's do it.
Jump in.
Okay, so my name is Bill Ball. I'm a member of the Sales Enablement Society. I welcome everybody to today's webinar. And by being a member of the Sales Enablement Society, you're part of the only global nonprofit dedicated to elevating sales enablement as a strategic function and to drive growth within your organizations. That was a lot, right? But it's important because we've talked in past webinars about an insider's view on hiring and scaling and even role designation on teams, because we all want our functions to grow. That's a big part of why we're here. So how are we going to grow or advise others if we're not looking for new ways of working on our own practice, especially after last year? Not to mention, we spend a lot of time innovating on behalf of others. So we're due for some self-care, whether that comes in the form of tips or tricks or practical shortcuts that ultimately mean some time better spent. So because you've invested some of your time in self-care today, Jonathan Carlson and Mary Charles, who are in marketing and sales enablement at Allego, respectively, are here to make good for you on that commitment. And before I hand it over to them to answer some questions that we always get, yes, this is being recorded. Yes, please post your questions and share your ideas in the chat today. And yes, we'll fold them into the conversation to keep it meaningful to your business. So without further ado, Jonathan and Mary, take it away.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you everybody on the line for attending. We're so excited to be with you today. And yeah, this is I think an important topic, or an interesting one at the very least, especially having gone through the past 16 months or however long it's been of remote work. Right. And I know that's been the theme of probably every webinar you've been on over the past 16 months. But I think it's important that we kind of gather together now and we think about how can we get even better at what we do and even better at communicating with each other. That's really the core of what this presentation is about, is how can you communicate with your teams and with your companies in a more efficient and effective way. So the title is Asynchro-what? Because asynchronous is like kind of a bulky word. It doesn't exactly roll off the tongue, but the concept of asynchronous communication is nothing new, right? And we'll get into the definition in a moment, but how we're thinking about asynchronous communication these days has changed, I think, and we have a few tips and tricks to help communication within your teams and at your companies in general become easier and more effective for you. Quick intro. So I'm John Carlson. I'm Senior Director of Marketing at Allego. Mary Charles is our fearless Sales Enablement Director at Allego. So she knows exactly what you guys are going through. So I'm just along for the ride for a lot of this. Mary's got amazing stories and practical knowledge to share with all of you. So with that, let's jump right in. As promised, here's our definition of asynchronous communication. So we've got synchronous communication, which is communication that happens in real time. So for those of you who are on the webinar live right now, we're communicating synchronously. However, if you were to watch this webinar on demand, that would be, and then I were to respond to you somehow, that would be asynchronous communication, right? Email is a great fundamental example of asynchronous communication. I send you an email, you read it on your own time, you email me back on your own time. That's been tried and true. But what we're going to focus on today is asynchronous communication through video, right? Because we all know that video inherently is more personal and in many ways more engaging and more effective than text communication. And there are all sorts of interesting things that you can do when you're communicating asynchronously through video. So we're gonna jump into all of those as the slides go on. Examples of asynchronous video content, just to contextualize things for you. Welcome videos, right, for new hires, right? So you can have your CEO record a video welcoming you to the team if you're a new hire. Samples of what presentations should look like, slide deck presentations should look like. On the sales team, you can record mock calls and share those with your teams. You can record hot seat exercises, right, where sellers have to record themselves going through specific selling scenarios and submit those videos to their teams or to their coaches to get feedback. Examples of best practices can be shared via video. Product updates, product launch training, feedback and assessments, competitive intelligence sharing, and then training and certification. Sure, you can do all this without a lot of this without video, but video makes it all so much more impactful. And you can do it all with recorded video so that people can record it on their time and consume it on their time and get feedback on their time. That's what this is all about, right? I think, we talked about Zoom fatigue at the very beginning, and it's such a real thing, right? Being on live call after live call, day after day, trying to fit into your team's calendars to get all your meetings done. It's just not possible if your team is big enough and you've got enough on your plate, which I assume most of you do. So we're looking for ways to accommodate for that and get people communicating with each other in a way that does not necessarily require everybody to be in the same place at the same time. So that's really the goal here. As we talk about asynchronous communication, I think it's useful to know that we actually conducted some research on this topic earlier this year. You can take a look at the methodology, but we went out to 250 B2B business leaders and asked them about asynchronous communication. And here are just a few of the takeaways that we found. Found that 77% of leaders who've been forced to work more asynchronously over the past year and a half due to COVID say they actually prefer to work this way and will continue to prefer to work this way, even if they go back to a more in-person work environment. It's pretty interesting. 34% of leaders say that they actually retain information better when they consume it asynchronously at their own pace versus in a live session with other people. It's actually somewhat counterintuitive to what we've heard before, right? So often you hear that, oh, the live classroom, the live learning experience is more effective. It's not always the case. For many people, they prefer to consume content on their own time and they learn better that way. 72% of leaders say they would actually have a better relationship with their managers if they communicated less face-to-face. I don't know if that's sad or interesting or both, but even so, it hammers home this idea that you don't have to be live to build good relationships with your coworkers and with your managers and with your coaches, right? In many cases, you can actually build very strong relationships in an asynchronous manner. So, but you've got to know how to go about it, right? You can't just flip a switch and have this all work. So that's a lot of what we're going to go into. So I believe before we jump into the agenda, let's launch a poll, Joanna, if you don't mind, because now that we've defined asynchronous video communication, I'm curious to hear from you guys. How many of you are currently using asynchronous video to communicate? Just simple, or are you using it to communicate? Yes or no? See the results come in here, coming in fast and furious, which is good. Mary, any predictions as to what we're going to see?
I'm going to guess 50-50.
Could be. Yeah, I think I would bet we'll lean a little bit more towards the S's, just because we've been in this remote environment for so long, right? I bet folks have figured this out to some degree. Give it a couple more seconds here to come in, but it looks like things are settling. All right, Joanne, you want to go ahead and close that poll? Perfect. All right. So 65 yes, 35 no. So I think I win. But that falls in line, right, with where we are as a work environment these days. It's just impossible to communicate with everybody live when you're not always with each other. So, but still a healthy chunk of people who are not using asynchronous video. So this is good. I think those who are using this communication method, there's still probably a lot of value that we can give you in terms of how to optimize it. And for those who aren't, we'll give you some ideas as to how to get started. So with that, let's jump into the first point. Today we're going to share 5 benefits of asynchronous video, and the first one is meet less to collaborate more. So Mary, you want to take this one away?
Sure. The title, it's not meant to be misleading. It seems a little counterintuitive. How can we collaborate more if we're meeting less? And when we say meeting, we mean not just in person, obviously, but virtually as well. So how can we collaborate more with less meeting time, or make the most of the meeting time that we do have together? And as John mentioned, people have real Zoom fatigue. I know I do, and I'm having a hard time focusing and making sure I'm looking straight at the camera all the time, right now. So the process, and I'm going to give some real examples. Bill asked me to share some examples during this call, and I've been a practitioner for a long time. I've been at Allego for 3 years, but I've worked at IBM and Salesforce and big companies, small companies, all sizes. And I'm really excited about the process that we've developed with our team, which is we record updates before meetings. And when I say before meetings, I mean all company meetings like we had yesterday virtually. I mean sales meetings, I mean sales training. It could just be a session to go over messaging for marketing, but any kind of meetings we try to do as much as we can asynchronously ahead of the meeting time. Sometimes we can't get everybody on the same page literally on the calendar at the same time. We say, you know what, I'm just going to send out a video for people to review, comment on, and we're going to collaborate that way. But generally we record updates or any kind of information before a meeting, and the participants watch that. And it's so powerful, even in our company meeting yesterday, where we got everybody together, we welcomed them, and then we said, okay, go off and watch these videos asynchronously and take your time and comment where you have questions. And you just can absorb the information so much better than in a live call. You have a time to process it, rewind if you missed something, right? And once we have the meetings, the face-to-face meetings, then we can, if we still need one, then we can really use that time for that discussion collaboration. So if I have a video that I've put out getting ready for a meeting to discuss competitors, and I see John put a comment about one of them, I say, John, I noticed on the video you commented that you've seen this competitor a lot in the marketplace. Can you give us some more examples? So imagine how much more effective that is. And getting contributions from all participants is really important. If you're like me, I've been in a lot of meetings virtually, and it's hard to get a word in edgewise sometimes, even for someone as chatty as I am. You can't get it in, right? And then there's somebody dominating the meeting, and then there are people who are shy, and it's extremely challenging. But if you do this kind of virtual asynchronous method, it gives everybody a chance to participate. It's more equitable. And we've found our meetings to be much more productive, collaborative, through use of that asynchronous video. And when I talk about videos, you got to keep them short. You got to make them bite-sized, because if you put out a 30-minute, even a 20-minute video, people aren't going to get through it. So we've found 5 minutes is about the right increment, even if you have to do multiple videos, but do a couple of short ones as opposed to a longer one.
Yeah, that's absolutely critical, right? I think sometimes people can be daunted by having to put together a really professional, really comprehensive video, right? It can be nerve-wracking to have to do that, but it doesn't have to be, it just has to be like you're talking to somebody, right? At Allego, we always say that your videos should be more like YouTube and less like Hollywood, right? So, make sure that you're getting your point across, but doesn't have to be perfect, doesn't have to have all sorts of professional lighting and audio, and doesn't have to be long, right? It can just be bite-sized, useful nuggets of information.
Yeah, and being, I see some comments in the chat, but being really purposeful about what you need to meet about and when you can do it asynchronously. So I am not suggesting that you never meet live. I'm saying that there are sometimes you don't need to, and there are other times where it just enhances the time you have together live because everybody's prepped for that meeting.
Yeah, 100%.
So we're seeing a ton of stuff in the chat, you guys, and Scott mentioned that he's using short videos weekly for a number of different things, but I wanted to key in on something that Mary mentioned, those people dynamics in those meetings, right? It's even more intense in video because you're not in the room together and you don't get the body language. So one thing I found in my very early journey in asynchronous communication, this is super educational for me, is the people that end up speaking less in those in-person video or in-person meetings are speaking even less in the video meetings. And so by breaking that apart, it's actually brought those people up. And a lot of times people that speak the least have the most interesting things to say.
They had the best ideas. I know. Yeah. It's really true. That blends perfectly into the next bullet point. So thanks, Bill. That's how do you accommodate the type B disease. What we mean by that is not everybody is a type A, right? But type A's and dominant personalities tend to dominate conversations live, right? It's just how it goes. We've all been in those meetings where it's a group of 15 or 20 people and 3 people speak the entire time, and everybody else, nods along or opens their mouth to try to speak and then thinks better of it, to get their thoughts together. I'm like that a lot. I like to listen, right? I like to listen and think about what's happening and think about, do I have something valuable to say? Or do I not? And sometimes live meetings aren't really conducive to that, right? They can move so fast and ideas go so fast and people are talking so much that people don't always have time to voice their opinions and their ideas. And that just means that we're all losing out on those ideas, right? If we're not hearing them. And as Bill just said, they can be really, really valuable. So asynchronous video communication levels the playing field. It can give folks who might be less comfortable talking in a live environment the time and space to gather their thoughts and think about how they want to convey those thoughts, and then more effectively share those thoughts with the group, right? Without everybody watching them, without feeling the pressure of having to come up with something really smart to say right now, otherwise I'm going to miss my opportunity. That's important, right? People don't always come up with their best ideas on the fly. Very often it requires time and space to come up with those ideas. So like I say, it's this way of leveling the playing field and making it fair, making sure that if you have something to say, if you want to share something, if you have a strong opinion about something, you have the opportunity to share it, rather than just sort of getting blown over and passed by. It brings equity to the communication, right? That's so much of what we talk about at Allego is democratization of communication and collaboration, and content creation, training, right? Knowledge sharing. Shouldn't all come from the top down, right? It's got to come from everybody at the company, right? So this is a great example of that, allowing everybody's voice to be heard. This type of tool gives you the vehicle to do that. So, it's just something to think about. Something to think about certainly as you're conducting your next live meeting, because as Mary said, live meetings shouldn't go away. They're really important. But as you're conducting your next live meeting, make sure that you're giving people the opportunity to bring their ideas to the forefront, and then make sure that you're following up in a way, whether it's through video recordings or something else, but make sure that you're following up with everybody in that meeting and making sure that you've gathered all of the contributions that are actually there, right? Instead of just, again, ending the meeting and moving on. Mary, anything you want to add to this one before we
No, I think it's all true. I agree with you.
Yeah. All right. So coach and practice smarter. Mary, let's talk about coaching and training, right? This is so much of what we focus on in the world of Allego, and we do most of it asynchronously these days. So why don't you talk about some of the benefits?
Yeah, and I'm sure a lot of people on this call feel really passionate about coaching, whether you're doing it or your first line managers are doing it or your executives help with that. But I think, it is the most impactful activity on a sales team that a manager can do, or even a sales enablement person like us can do, to have a positive impact on improving performance for reps, or any sales role, really. And the number one obstacle to doing coaching when we do surveys and things like that, we find, is time. And I think we have a poll question that we were going to bring up. So let's take a look at that real quick. I don't see it. Do you guys? Oh, there we go. Thanks. So, this is institutional. We had one in coaching. We'll skip this one for now. Let's close that one. We'll come back. All right, I'm going to keep going. Sorry about that. So assuming that time is the number one challenge, right? Let's just keep that in mind. How can we do this asynchronously? And what I've spent more time in the last 6 months doing coaching virtually and asynchronously than ever in my career, especially because we're not all in the office, and that kind of on the fly coaching that I might do in the office isn't happening. So first is to really get people practicing and getting feedback. And if you're not doing that in a classroom setting, being able to do that asynchronously using video exercises can be a tremendous help. And what we find is that reps want to practice and hand in something for their video submission that's really good. So they're going to practice. In fact, we find that they practice 6 times more when they have to do it this way than if they just get up in front of a room and have to present something, right? Or do a role play. So that element of practice is super important in helping them improve. The other piece is for managers, right? So being able to find the time to coach is so hard, but if you can do it asynchronously, if you can review those exercises, review people practicing their pitch and overcoming objections, if you can do that at a time that's convenient for you. I know my son was at track practice last night, and I had my phone and I was reviewing videos and making comments. And it just, especially with this hybrid environment we're in, or some people still virtual, you got to do it when you find the time. You're not always going to be able to get on the calendar, schedule a live session with a rep and start to give them feedback. Again, I'm not saying don't ever have live calls with your reps, but if you've got, I had to review 17 ADR exercises a couple of weeks ago, and I could never have done that one-on-one with every single one of them. And so they recorded, I reviewed, I gave feedback to them, and we're seeing great improvements. So that's the practice and exercise element of it. And then for reviewing game film, we know all great athletes, some you may like better than others, will review game film no matter how good they are, to see how did they do. And if you're in a position to record customer conversations or prospect conversations, it's incredibly valuable. So if you have to get them to agree to the recording, whatever you might have to do, but being able to record those conversations and seeing what you taught, all that effort you put into training people and helping them learn those skills and get that knowledge, they practice it, they sound really good. Then what happens when they're actually on the phone? And because we're in a virtual selling environment, most of us, not all, but most of us are still selling virtually, and we're not have reps who are out on the road all the time. We have this opportunity to kind of get some insight and say, hey, here's some visibility. Let's see what people are doing. But again, time, it prevents you from being on all those calls, right? You can't do that. Managers can't be on every call with their reps. So if they can review that, and being able to give that coaching and feedback asynchronously, it's so valuable. And then if you find some more of those gold nuggets, you can, extract those and share those with the team. The last thing I'll point out here is that I also like to have, I know you guys probably do this all the time when you're giving coaching, you say, how do you think you did? So having people watch their own game film and self-assess is extremely valuable. Is there awareness? Do they see what they're doing well or not doing well? Are they consciously competent or some other version of that? And then they can also ask for feedback. Yesterday, I had a account development rep who's doing prospecting, had a call that went really poorly, sent me a message and said, hey, I had a call, did not go well. I'd really love your feedback. And he's sharing the call with me. I'll review it, post some comments, and I'll do that tonight, right? I can't do it during the middle of the day. I've got meetings and things. So asynchronous has been extremely valuable from a coaching perspective for me and for my managers. And, I hope you guys are able to work that in as well, so you can find the time to do coaching, because it's so valuable.
That's awesome, Mary. Go ahead, please.
there's a ton of questions coming in the chat, and some of them track around coaching. I wanted to harken back to something that Mary mentioned that really hit me hard, which was getting people to look at their own work before they come to you. I mean, this is a basic principle, guys. I know we're talking about video and game film and all of that stuff, and some of that's like current practice for you guys, and some of it isn't. But it's just like one-on-ones, right? Is it better if your person runs the one-on-one themselves and sort of brings that information to you and is driving value for themselves that way, or is it better that you're running it, right? It's the same principle with coaching and game film. And like I need to figure out, I'd love to figure out, Mary, I've got like 20 managers that I have to coach through. I don't even get down to the reps, because then that's where it starts to get a little crazy for me.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
I got to figure out how to get my managers managing on video. That's kind of a joke, and see where I go from there. Juliana asks, do you guys worry at all about people getting isolated or lack of connection if the majority of the comms is asynchronous?
That's a great question.
How do you stay humanistic? The big question is, how do we stay humanistically connected in all of this? Because I think that's kind of a bigger picture question.
Yeah. We're really fortunate, because last week we actually had our first in-person sales meeting for our whole team in a year and a half. All right. So that was amazing. It reminded me, Bill, to your point, like, how do you stay connected? It reminded me how much that connection has been missing. I could say for new hires in particular, this is very important as we're onboarding and training them, that we do, I spend time with them virtually, face-to-face, live every day. So they're doing asynchronous work, but we're able to use that live time for me to ask them questions, check for understanding, do role plays, do all that good stuff, as opposed to me just telling them information. So we still have live calls all the time. It's not a substitute, but it certainly makes those live calls more valuable.
Yeah.
We try to do, a lot of fun stuff too, right? Just connecting. And I start all my Friday mornings with it's Friday then. So just music and, fun things. And I know people on this call have tons of ideas to do that, but definitely asynchronous is a supplement, not a substitute.
Took the words out of my mouth. And I wish I were part of those Friday meetings.
Oh, I'll make it happen, John.
Yeah, or at least just send me the music, or whatever you want. You can record yourself singing, send it asynchronous. That'd be good.
Can you guys take one more question before we move on?
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay, so this is another kind of big one, but I think this hits at the heart of the things that, like, as sales enablers, we're change agents, and we're trying to help the rest of our organization figure this thing out. Like, I've got HR people asking me questions, and I'm like, why are you asking me questions? But they are, right? So that's just the dynamic. So Fair asked a really cool question. My worry is, with all this asynchronous, you're gonna end up working extra and taking on all the asynchronous stuff, and it ends up taking, you give your work during the day, and then you also pushing more work at night. So how do you sort of strike a balance there? Because I heard what Mary said. It's like, yes, I do that stuff off hours too. It's almost like grading papers in some ways, but it still matters, right? We're still expanding the day. So how do you strike that balance?
Yeah, it's John has a new baby and I have a 10-year-old kid. So we know, and honestly, when my kid would come home from school during the year, I would take a break then. So that's part of why I do the asynchronous has helped me. So it's not that I'm working more hours per se, it's that I'm working different hours. And I think that's really what it is for me. And for others, I'd be interested to hear what they're doing. John, you want to comment on that as well?
I feel exactly the same way. Yeah, I mean, when you have a kid, just because that's applicable to both of us, it changes your life and it changes your schedule really tangibly, right? Like I used to work from 9 to 7 every day, and I would get my work done, and then I'd come home, and then I'd be home, and that would be it. Now I can't do that, right? I've got to drop my daughter off at daycare. I've got to pick her up sometimes at 4:30. Everything changes. So asynchronous, yeah, I mean, you've got to be careful. You got to be careful no matter what tool you use or what method of communication you use to maintain work-life balance, right? And keep that in check. And I think we all have to be cognizant of that. And no tool is going to solve that for you. In fact, many of these so-called productivity tools sometimes make you so productive that you never stop working. And we just need to be careful of that. But Asynchronous gives you the flexibility you need to live the life that you need to live or want to live, right? You don't always have to be in the office for the same hours as everybody else in order to continue to be productive with all of those people. So I totally agree with you, Mary, and absolutely fair. I mean, I think, again, very valid concern, and not one that we can just wave a magic wand and say, oh, it's not a problem, this will never happen, you'll never be overworked. Everybody has to be cognizant of each other's time, and that has to be built into the culture, right? If you build a culture of learning and knowledge sharing and asynchronous communication and collaboration, that's amazing, but part of that culture has to be, part of the reason we're doing this is to be respectful of people's time, right? To be respectful of their flexibility, not to take advantage of the ability to work longer hours. That's what I'd say. Anything else, Bill? Anything else you got for us? All right, let's keep on rolling. Informalized feedback and sharing. So I think this is actually a pretty nice transition as well, because what this slide and all the points on it really are meant to say is that coaching and training and enablement shouldn't just be on the shoulders of one person or one team, right? It shouldn't all be on Mary to make sure that our sales team has everything they need to sell, right? It's too much. It's too much for one person. And if it's all on her, she's gonna end up working those long hours that we're trying to avoid, right? So how can we distribute some of that burden to the entire team? Because as we already established, everybody on the team, right, from the newest BDR to the highest ranking sales leader has knowledge that can be valuable, right? Sellers are out there in the field every single day, talking to the market, telling us what we should know, right? Sales enablement, product marketing, we all provide tools to the team that we think are going to be useful, right? We're making hypotheses about what we think are going to work, what we think is going to work. But sellers are the ones who are actually out there executing what we're telling them to execute, and they can give us feedback, right? And say, actually, you know what? This slide deck didn't work. You know what? This pain point that we thought was really acute actually doesn't seem to resonate with people. So we've got to change it. That helps us. That helps us as we create content and train and coach. So we need to be soliciting feedback from the entire team on all of these topics and more. And asynchronous video recording is it's a good way to do that, right? So a rep can go out in the field, even if it's on the phone, right? On Zoom or whatever. They can have a meeting. Something can go really well. Something can go really wrong, like Mary was talking about. They can learn something really interesting about a competitor or about the way that a prospect is thinking about a deal that's applicable to the entire team. They can then record themselves sharing that feedback, and they can share it with the team, right? Especially if they're using a tool like Allego, it makes it really easy to do that. So we need to find a way to, no matter what platform you're using, and you don't have to use a platform, but it helps, as we say on the slide, you need to find a way to capture the knowledge from your team and use that as knowledge that you can use to train and enable everybody else on your team, right? So you can mine and curate content from top performers. You can look at their recorded calls and clip sections that they do particularly well that other people can replicate. We always talk about being able to replicate A-player behavior within any sales team, right? What better way to do that than to show the rest of the team on video what those A players are doing in the field live? That's fantastic. All of us should be doing that. We should also be pulling from other areas of the company, right? I think sometimes in marketing and sales enablement, we feel sort of a little insulated from product teams, even customer success teams sometimes, right? We should be leaning on those teams. They have expertise in our companies, right? That we can use to sell, that we can use to better communicate our value proposition to the field, into the market. So why wouldn't we want to tap people within those organizations to do the same thing, to record themselves sharing something new about the product or something new that they've learned about existing customers, and use that as training material, right? And use that as something that we share with our sales team every day, every week, every month, rather than somebody like Mary or many of you on the call having to come up with all that content on your own, right? That's a losing battle. So we're looking for ways, again, to distribute the training and coaching and enablement load across the team. This inherently helps to drive message consistency, right? If we start all pulling from the same playbooks and we start seeing the message that our teammates are delivering in the field, we can say, oh, I'm not doing it that way. If I'm a rep, right? I should be changing the way I sell. I should be changing the way that I talk about our product so that I'm aligned with everybody else. It's really, really helpful to see it in black and white, right? To see the game tape and understand what you might be doing well and where you might need improvement. So I think that's it for this slide, unless, Bill, Mary, any commentary here or any questions that we're getting?
I've got a question, and maybe Mary can answer it, but I won't put her on the spot. Either one of you guys can answer it, because I care. The chat's gotten a little quiet on this topic, and I'm not going to second guess what that might be, but maybe wondering, like, okay, if it's not instilled in your company culture, and we're getting a couple of questions coming in, but if it's not instilled in your company culture to do this video feedback thing, like, and at the kind of scale that you're talking about, how do you help people like dip their toes in the water on this? Because I've got a non-video culture and I've done a few things, but before I'm not the expert here. So how would you suggest people get started with getting video feedback kind of as a comfortable, regular thing, rather than like what you were talking about at the beginning of the webinar, which is like, it's not Hollywood. You don't have to, get all snazzy and have the perfect lighting and all that other kind of stuff because it's feedback.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Bill, I'll address it, not just for feedback, but for anything to do with the video. So before I worked for Allego, I used Allego. I was a customer and brought Allego in. So brought in this whole idea of video where people weren't comfortable and we weren't on Zoom on camera. And this was in 2015. So it was even harder to get people to be on camera. Now we're on camera all day, every day. So we're getting used to that. Not that we love it, but we get used to it. So there are two approaches I took. One is I would guess, and people can feel free to comment, but how many of you have your go-to people in the organization, your sales reps that you can ask to do anything for you, right? People have those people. So you have them, Bill, right? I always know that's like the first thing I try to figure out when I enter a new organization. Who are going to know those people? I'm going to be best friends with those people. I'm going to give them stuff. I'm going to ask them for stuff. Right? And I'm going to make sure they have a good time on the club trip, right? All that stuff. So what I did when I was at this company called Demandware, we started launching this and we said, okay, well, we're going to have to use video. How are we going to get people to do it? People don't want to do it. So I went to those people that I knew are my go-to people, and I helped them prepare for it the first time. I made them comfortable with it, and I gave them something easy to do. Tell a customer story about one of the accounts you've sold and how great they're doing using our product, right? And they did it, and it took them a few takes, right, the first time to get used to it. But once other people saw them do it, it made them more comfortable. And then the next thing was, okay, now I have to do it. Now let me get my sales leader to do it. Let me get some other people in the organization who are respected, and give them some content to the field that's valuable to say, hey, here's my give to you. I'm giving you the dessert before vegetables. And now I'm going to ask you to do something after this, right? So they saw value in what was being produced. They saw the best people in the organization, the most successful doing it. And then that's how it caught on before we required them to start doing something. So that's how I approached it, and it worked well.
Yeah, I think that's spot
summing
on.
that up. It's like, make it easy, right? Make it a small ask. How did your first week go? Something where they're just learning the functionality of the video and not thinking of the long division problem of the answer. And then getting your best people or your top people or notable influencers in the organization to have that stuff. That's super cool.
Yeah.
Go ahead, John. Sorry.
I was going to say, I think you're right on, Mary, in terms of starting small, getting a few of your top people to contribute videos of value. And the thing to remember here too is that sellers really trust each other, right? They're in the field together. We call it, if we say they're in the arena together, out there in the world selling. They're getting shot down every day. They're having wins every day, but they're in that fight together, and they trust each other, right? And often they trust each other more than they trust sort of top-down knowledge that's thrown at them. So we found that once you start to build this culture of knowledge sharing amongst reps, it really builds on itself because they find it incredibly valuable, right? And they are hearing from their peers more than they ever were before, and they like that and they want to contribute to that. So yeah, you've got to put in the effort up front. You got to do it strategically to get that wheel spun up. But once you do, reps see the value and they appreciate the value and they appreciate hearing from one another, and it really starts going on its own. It's pretty cool.
And Bill, the other thing I was going to say, which I see you've posted a question, I don't see anyone answering it yet, but is I have my new hires. I mean, we're lucky. We use Allego. It's our own platform, but I did use this in another company, so it can be done. And once you make the commitment to it, there's no stopping it. But we have new hires record a video by their second day, introducing themselves to the whole company. And that gets pushed out, and we have a video directory of every employee. So everybody's done at least one, right? And they love it. They love it. It's like, oh, and then they post comments and they're like, welcome to the team. I have a dog too. I also like to fish, right? That creates that connection and camaraderie and just gets people comfortable. And then each week of their first 4 weeks in their ramp, as we're doing onboarding, they also send a video to me that goes to me and their manager on how their week went, feedback on the program they're doing, any changes they suggest, anything they don't understand. So it creates that good communication, but they get used to doing it via video right from the beginning.
Yeah. All right. Anything else in this, or should we move on? I think we're good. All right. So our last point, Mary, here we go. Institutionalizing knowledge. Let's hit this one as we round things out.
Yeah. So when we say institutionalized knowledge, I think everybody knows what we're talking about, but just to be sure we're on the same page with this, it's just being able to capture those great best practices, sharing what people are learning out in the field, from the field, those trusted peers, right? Like John was talking about, and how do you institutionalize that? So now I know we have a poll question that we're going to put up on this. So let's do the poll.
There it is.
All right. So before I say anything, how challenging is it to institutionalize knowledge at your organization? Is it very challenging somewhat, or not at all challenging?
Since I can't vote, I'm just going to say very. But I'll be interested to see what other people say.
Okay.
We have SMEs in my organization that have a line waiting to speak to them. And it's like, it's all I can do to scramble to get what's scalable and put it somewhere else, because otherwise that just self-perpetuates and becomes worse over time as the company grows.
Oh yeah. And so many great ideas are just shouted out in conversation, right? They're this ephemeral thing. It's like, oh, wait, like, how do I bottle that up and share it with everybody? But,
or they leave when the person leaves the organization.
Well, that's a huge one. That's a huge one, right? As people retire, as they leave. That's actually been one thing. And Mary, I don't mean to detract from your slide, but
no,
I found that incredibly useful at Allego. You know, if we have people on the team turn over, in the past, you sort of have to create your onboarding playbook for whoever you bring in next in that role from scratch. But with a tool like Allego, with all this amazing ability to capture video knowledge and have people recording how they do things, it's become so much easier because I can just point new hires to those videos and say, hey, watch these videos, and then you'll know how to do your job. It's pretty awesome. All right, so I think we can close the poll.
Yep, let's see what the results were. Oh, no one said not at all. So it's either very or somewhat challenging. Okay, so this is a relevant slide. We won't skip it. So this gold from the water cooler, this capturing people's brilliance and excellence, it is challenging if you don't have a mechanism to do it. And it can be also challenging to get people to share if that's not part of your culture, or it's not facilitated in some way, or people are all spread out and we're not all together in the office. But even when we're back together in person, it's still a challenge, right? So we had our sales meeting last week. Everybody was there. During the meeting, some great ideas came up. And then at a lunch break, I was talking to people. I'm like, did you understand what Chester was talking about? And they're like, no, I didn't really get it. So what I'm doing is I go back and I say, can you go ahead, Chester, and record some, that gold nugget of how to look for this same type of opportunity in deals. So I solicit that as I see it. And some people are more proactive about it. We are able to, they basically can go into Allego, press a button and record a video, and it gets routed to the right people. And they say, hey, here's a sales tip. Here's a competitive insight. Here's how I sold this new product, right? So they can just easily we make it very easy for them to do it. But you do have to solicit that. Again, go to the people you see having success. And anytime if there's a forecast call and I happen to call in that day and someone says, I had a call with a CMO and it was the first time I talked about this new thing and it was so great. And I say, awesome. I want you to, tell me who that call was. And we're going to go clip it, the game tape film, and share it with people. And on top of that, I want you to record just a 2-minute on what did you do that worked so well? And what was the response from that CMO? And we have ways to facilitate it, but it does take effort. You have to do that. But the more you can get your sales leadership team to say, hey, something good happened, just tell me what had happened and we'll connect with the rep and get that, whether it's a recording or it's a game film or whatever it might be. But all those key sales moments we don't want to lose. And we want to, then I take those and it makes my job so much easier because then I curate that kind of content. And as John said, I put it into my onboarding. I put it into my just-in-time learning library. So people can go back and say, oh, what was that thing Chester said to do again? I got to go back to that, right? And it works. And it's just, it takes some effort, but it's well worth it. And you have to solicit people for it in the beginning until it catches on. And then ego gets in there a little bit where they say, oh, I want to share something. I did something really good, right?
Yeah, awesome. Bill, any questions here before we move on?
Comment from Charlie. Charlie's been pretty active today in general, and he mentions creating a joint sales and marketing best practices location where people can record videos and others can access them. So that library, right? So the Hall of Fame, or the Hall of Shame. I think some people forget about making the Hall of Shame and like what not to do. When you've got willing participants, that's actually sometimes a better learner too. But if we're just talking about institutional knowledge, I don't know what you guys are doing as far as this goes, if it's culture, or do you do what Charlie does and incentivize people to participate, through some kind of reward and recognition program. So it doesn't sound like it's a one-off. This sounds like an ongoing thing. I'm not sure if you guys have done that on your end or experienced that with your customers or not.
It is, for us, it's ongoing, but we do incentivize. I'll give you an example. This came up today. We're trying to get our ADRs to ask for business pain on their cold calls. Their calls are recorded. And we said, hey, first person who asked for business pain today, post in Slack, you did it and what call, and you're going to get $25 gift card, right? So that's a perfect example of share some knowledge of how you did it. And a real example, we're going to go clip that call. I'm going to share it out with everybody, put it in our best practices library and add it to my new hire onboarding. It saves me. How easy can my job be? Why did they even pay me? It's so simple.
Yeah, it's so easy. It's crazy. Yeah, that's awesome. I do think at Allego, because it's who we are and what we do, we've done a pretty good job of making it part of the culture, right? And like I said, once it does hit that threshold of it's no longer a chore, it doesn't feel like something extra to do it, but it's just part of the process. It really does take on a life of its own. So I think I love incentives. I love it, especially for sales teams and like specific tasks like that. I think the goal for any organization should be to use technology like this at a certain point to just as part of your everyday experience, right? In the flow of your work, you're creating videos, you're consuming videos, you're learning, you're improving. Right? It's a better way to learn in a lot of ways.
So let's move up a level. Let's get out of sales reps for a second, because if we're institutionalizing knowledge, that's coming from like hard slog SMEs that may be like the quiet geniuses in the company or the sought after geniuses in the company. So the incentive for them is different, right? It's their time, right? They've got, I have a person in the managed services division of my company, where it's like, if your problem isn't big enough, he's not going to talk to you. I mean, it's at that level, and like, I'm saying it out loud, and there's the absurdity of it, just like with you guys hearing it, right? But I imagine other people have like people access challenges. So how do you get, it's one thing to get reps to do that like temporary change management thing. And I love what Mary mentioned about that. How do you unlock that information from people that like have stored it over time and then help them realize the importance of doing it so it actually happens?
Yeah. Bill, do you find that when those subject matter experts, I'm guessing that they get pinged a lot asking for the same information over and over? So my suggestion is you position it as what's in it for them. Hey, you don't want to get that same question over and over in Slack, in email, people calling you. If you could record a short video with these 3 key points, I promise I'll share that out, make sure people see it, and then you'll get fewer calls like that. Do you think that would be appealing to them, Bill? Would that work?
I think it's a starting point. I think it's something to get them thinking and consider in the first place, for sure. I think that's super helpful.
Yeah, I think motivation is key, right? If it's somebody who likes public recognition, wow, I can't wait for people to see this, what you just did. You're so really knowing what's going to get them motivated and what's in it for them, I guess is what I'd say.
That makes a lot of sense.
I think that's exactly right, Mary, and extremely practical and actionable. I think from a bigger picture, probably like fluffier, probably more idealistic perspective, I do think there's incentive to people outside of the sales organization to contribute to sales success, right? Because then you're contributing to overall company success, like really real way. And I think people on the product team don't always feel that way. I mean, yeah, which is crazy because they're building the product, right? They are the company in so many ways, but they don't always, it's not always flashy, right? They don't always get the recognition of a seller who hits their quota. And, you know, whenever companies hit their goals, it's always about, oh, the sales team did this amazing thing. I think people want to share in that success, right? You want to bring that success to the rest of the organization. And again, that's a cultural thing that builds over time. But if people start to see that by contributing content like this, they feel more attached to the company and to their goal, to the company's goals and to the company's success, I think that can only help things. All right. I believe that is all she wrote for this. So just a quick recap of what we talked about today. We talked about how to meet less to collaborate more, right? So stretching outside of the confines of a linear calendar and being able to work asynchronously on your own time and get more done. Accommodating the type B disease we talked about, right? So ensuring that everybody gets to share their voice and share their ideas and their opinions. Talked about coaching and practicing smarter, right? Using asynchronous video as a scalable coaching tool, right? To make sure that all of your reps are getting the support that they need, rather than having only paying attention to a few of your reps, or only getting to treat your team as a whole rather than the sum of individuals. Always important. We talked about informalizing feedback and knowledge sharing, democratizing that process, getting some of the burden off of the sales enablement team. And then, of course, we just finished talking about institutionalizing knowledge and everything that goes into that. So hopefully you found some of these tips useful, and you can listen, you watch one of these webinars and we throw a ton of information at you. And I know I can come away sometimes thinking, well, I can't do all of that right now. It's just too much. You don't have to do all of it. Just pick one of these, right? Pick one bullet within one of these sections that struck you as, hey, maybe this was a good idea. Maybe I can do this, and do it. And then start building on it and build on it over time and build it organically and build it in a way that fits your team and your company. This isn't supposed to be one size fits all, but it's a starting point for you, hopefully. So with that, Bill, do we have any other questions that we want to tackle today?
Just a lot of thanks. Yes, and yes to everybody. We're going to be sending the recording. I don't know if we send the chat or not, so Joanna might be able to respond on that into the chat. Joanna, can you respond in the chat if we can share the chat with people? Somebody was saying it was a great resource and good information, as it always tends to be, provided your eyes can move quickly enough to follow it. So, will you be commenting on how to blend some of these techniques into sales kickoff events?
Yeah, I can comment because we did do this.
Yeah. Do you want to take 2 more minutes on that, and then we
Sure, I can do that quickly.
I think that's good.
We had a virtual kickoff, which I'm guessing some people will continue the virtual kickoff because those can be very expensive. But what we did is in the idea of that, using short videos to supplement a live session, instead of a 6-hour day of virtual remote sessions, we ended up shortening that down by quite a bit. And we did something called run up to kickoff. And in the 2 weeks prior to kickoff, we had a series of videos every day. A video would go out from a sales leader and say, hey, today, guys, you're going to be watching a couple of videos about how one of our customers used our product to onboard people more quickly, or how our marketing team is going to support you this year in getting you more leads, right? So a whole variety of topics you normally might cover at a kickoff. And we recorded them. And then each day I had a block on their calendar and said, hey, here's the time you can do it. If you do it at a different time, that's fine, but it's asynchronous. And so everybody knew each day I'm going to have a commitment to consume a little bit of information. And then a couple of times we had some live lunch and learns along the way as well. And then when we got to the live meeting, we did like 2 90-minute sessions because we had so much over that time, and people could post comments and questions on the videos and we could respond to those in them. And it worked well. And people said, except for like wanting to have a party and celebrate and be together from that perspective, the actual day of meeting piece, they said, next year, can we do the same thing? And I said, we'll see.
It's amazing, right? It's like you're doing the flipped classroom for the sales kickoff. And as much as like you've got people digging their heels and they realize how much more that, you know, that everybody's able to put together over that span of time, rather than just a fast forward of like data dump and then steak and wine, and then data dump and steak and wine and get on a plane.
Yeah. Yeah. It forces you to be more succinct.
All right, very good. Last thing I'll say before I pass it back over to you guys on the SCS team is, if you're interested in this topic, really encourage you to go check out our research report on asynchronous video and all the trends that we're seeing in the space today. You can go to allego.com/video 2021. But with that, I'll pass it back over to you, Bill or Joanna, or whoever's taking this slide.
I got it. I'm gonna try because a lot of this is new to me, including these graphics, which I'm excited about. We used to have this big lion, and now it's a lot more artistic. But we've got a conference coming up, you guys. We have a conference in Georgia this year for those who can't attend. So we're doing the big lift. We're talking about this. It's funny, we're talking about this in this webinar today, but we're going to be doing a hybrid conference where we have some synchronous and asynchronous stuff happening. What's important is next week our calls for speakers is opening, as well as registration. And so whether you want to register, if you're part of our global audience and you know, or you don't have a fly up yet, there's the virtual option. And if you want to try to roll up your sleeves and join me and join some other brave folks in Georgia and do what Mary said was so great, which was realize how awesome it is when you finally get back together with people, there's going to be the in-person, and you're going to get both the benefits of the virtual and the in-person experience. This has been awesome, you guys. A lot of people are saying thanks. This was super informative. I love that somebody asked again for the kickoff again, Mary. This has been fantastic. So thank you guys so much for helping people through to sort of rethink their game after they've just been drugged through meeting after video meeting for so long over the past year.
Yeah, thank you guys. This was great. Really appreciate the time.
Thanks.
Cheers, everybody.